The year is 1952. General Dwight D. Eisenhower was just elected president, and in a post-World War II world, he has a lot of decisions to make. Now, what does he do? He applies thinking and training that he learned in the military to develop what we now call the Eisenhower decision matrix, or Eisenhower box. This has 4 different quadrants. He essentially broke down his decision-making process into 4 quadrants that essentially had urgency on one axis and importance on another. This helps him decide on how to think through the many, many decisions that he had to make. So for example, if something was important and urgent, this is in the do category. Do this now, do this quickly. It is urgent after all. If he had a decision that was important but not urgent, he would decide to do it when. Essentially, this is scheduling the task for another time. It is important after all, but it's not urgent, so he can focus on the urgent tasks. Now, if something's not important but very urgent, he decided he would delegate. Who can do it for you? Who can make the decision on his behalf? And that delegation allowed him to free up time for the more important activities. And finally, if something is not urgent and not important, we would say delete or eliminate it. And this is not even worth a then general, now president's time. He oftentimes said, what is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important. Now, you might experience this in your own life, but we can take this principle and apply it to our own decision making. Now, this matrix works because it forces a decision about putting a topic into one of these 4 quadrants. There's no gray area. There's no, well, it might be a little bit important or a little bit, it's binary. It's black and white. And this clarity helped him then prioritize his decision-making processes and the things then that he would spend his time on. Fast forward to today, we have an overwhelming number of choices, especially around AI. When we think of business leaders or academic leaders making decisions around AI, it's oftentimes, can we use AI for this? Should we use AI for this? How do we think about it? And so on. Now, I would argue that many of the questions asked are the wrong questions. We are asking, can AI do this? Is AI good at that? Well, most of the time, the answer is either an astounding yes or not yet. Now, oftentimes we're also asking, should we use AI to do this? Well, this is a little complicated, but should is a moving target. Social norms around should we do this or should we do that, I would argue is not a good benchmark around deciding strategies for AI building or AI implementation. I think it's an important question, but I don't think it's the North Star because it's subjective. Now, if we apply the Eisenhower decision matrix to asking questions around AI, I think the right questions are, how often do we do this? How long does it take? What happens if it goes wrong? Now, many people have described the trade-off between the investment and the amount of time to build something and the amount of time you get back out. In fact, it was famously captured in this XKCD comic. How long can you work on making a routine task more efficient before you're spending more time than you save? So for example, if we do something one time and it would take 30 minutes to do it, but it takes an hour to build the task to automate it, you should probably just do it, right? So here's a funny how often you do the task versus how much time you shave off sort of matrix to help you decide. Interestingly, AI-based technologies upend this chart to some degree because how often you do the task is still important and how much time you shave off is still important, but the amount of time it takes to build these AI-based tools is rapidly decreasing. And so it throws this on its head a little bit, but the time element is still important. So as we think about, should we build AI into this? Should we build this AI solution? How do we think about our AI-based strategy? I would argue a bit like Eisenhower, we need an AI decision matrix. An AI decision matrix really is going to have time on one axis and stakes on the other axis. So let me go through this with you all here. So if we spend a lot of time on something, or the amount of time something takes is quite high, but the stakes are quite low, then we want to start in that quadrant. If we spend a lot of time on something, but the stakes increase, we need to think about this and enhance carefully. Now, if we don't spend very much time on it and the stakes are low, then go ahead, experiment freely. And then finally, if we don't spend much time on it, or if it doesn't take very much time, but the stakes are high, perhaps we need a human first and not AI first based solution. Okay, so let's look at a few specific examples. Now, if we look at the start here quadrant, this would be like things that take a lot of time but are low stakes. Email drafts, meeting minutes, maybe data cleaning, maybe first drafts of reports and so on. These are the sorts of things that can take a lot of time that could be enhanced or augmented by AI-based solutions. Now, if we start thinking, what do I mean by high stakes? High stakes would be financial reports, compliance, medical records, legal contracts, and so on. These also take a lot of time, but the outcome of this or the risk of AI doing something wrong under these conditions is much higher. Medical records have a much higher risk if they are wrong than an email draft if it is wrong. If we go to the experiment freely, this is brainstorming sessions, personal projects, prototypes, creative exploration, and so on. These are the sorts of things that maybe you don't do very often, but the stakes are still pretty low, so you could experiment. Is AI good at this? Could it help me with that? Can it help me to achieve a different perspective, and so on? And then finally, in the human first, I would say AI input only, but never a decision. When the stakes are high, what we need to do is we need to make sure there's a human in the loop. We need to make sure that we are not offloading something to AI, even if it doesn't take very much time, that could have a problematic outcome. So for example, strategic planning, crisis management, termination decisions, etc., etc. So these are the sorts of things that still the stakes are high and need a human first. Now, when you think about your tasks, you really want to think through repetitive, like what are you doing very often, daily or weekly occurrences, standard processes, template-based, similar inputs, outputs. And this last one is the most important. Could you write instructions for this? If you can write instructions for this, it probably means that this is a repetitive task and or a task that could be at least in part augmented by some of these AI-based solutions. Now, if we think of stakes, what do I mean by high stakes or low stakes? High stakes means significant cost of error. It means legal or compliance impact, affects people's lives, hard to reverse, or some reputational risk. So these are just some of the ideas as you think through the tasks that maybe could be augmented or offset by AI-based solutions. Now, you can use this framework to come up with your own tasks. What would you put in that start here box? What would you put in that human first box? Now, when you're thinking through this, you might say, well, I only spent a few seconds on this, or really it only takes a minute. But the power of offsetting some of these tasks really comes from compounding. So here's a plot by James Clear that shows 1% better every day for 1 year versus 1% worse every day from 1 year. And we can look at the change, right? We can look at improvement or decline over 1 year, and the relative difference in our improvement is much, much higher than the relative reduction in our loss or our worse every day. So what does this have to do with AI? Well, it turns out if we can save a little bit of time every day, that amount of time can compound that by the end of the year, it turns out to be a significant savings. So back to Eisenhower. Eisenhower knew that not every task deserves a general's attention. And I hope that this shows you not all tasks deserve an AI-based approach. And so what you can do is you can then take this information forward and you can start where AI can't hurt and helps you the most.